Hello, my beautiful humans, and welcome to the Becoming Human 2.0 Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Paul McFadden, and it's my mission to create global impact by cultivating real connection through having authentic conversations that matter. Today, I'm joined by my special guest, Christopher Sigmond, another beautiful human from the moon in the country of Sweden. And in this episode, we discuss awakening to life's flow, navigating the human experience. And of course, this conversation was completely unscripted. Here's a quick peek, and then we'll jump right into the conversation. So enjoy. And remember, we're all here to discover, awaken, and evolve together. But the mask has come off for a lot of people. And now the question is, I think many people are asking, okay, I can take the mask off, but how do I be myself?
Yep.
And I think the question I hear a lot of people asking is, who am I? And it's like,
Yeah,
oh yeah, but that's a great question. Who are you?
it is a great question. It's the biggest philosophical question we can ask. That's like such an opening. If once someone starts asking that question, that's like a ticket to embark on this beautiful journey of wherever it will take us. And
Where I'm going to take you.
yeah, this
And
is
so I,
lovely.
so I love it because the timing is right for folks to have some kind of awakening, or at least get reconnected to self, have the opportunity to explore themselves if they'd like to. I think more people will opt in than will opt out.
Hmm.
Chris, welcome.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here. Lovely.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on as well. And so let's kick off, because I know we did a little bit of an introduction right before we started, but and I think I was saying you're in Sweden, and I was saying what's beautiful about having these conversations is that I get to talk to people all over the world, and what I find interesting is that we're having similar conversations no matter what country that we're in. So it's almost like we're all having this human experience. We just don't talk about it, or when we do talk about it, it's behind closed doors. So tell me a little bit about you, maybe 50,000 foot view. Who is Chris? How did Chris get here? What's Chris passionate about? We'll start there.
Oh, great. So I just turned 50, so the 50 came back immediately.
Awesome.
And this has been a major transition point in my life, actually. So last year I felt was a year of homecoming, or actually a second homecoming, because early in life, when I was 21, I traveled around the world in 80 weeks. And that included being in India, where I had a epiphany of sorts, which was where I saw how my life made sense. Like everything up to that point fit together in this, oh, that's the river, and that's how it flows here and there, and I am here now. And so ever since then, I have been on this inner journey, and it has taken me to many different places, both inner and outer. But to a large extent, it's been many years of really uncovering myself, uncovering the things that happened in my early childhood up until 21. All the things that happened, there were goods and there were challenges. And so it's been quite a long time of self-discovery journey, doing the work. And now I'm at this transition point where all the things I've done over the years, studying, I have degrees in law, engineering, philosophy, I've studied music, languages, and much more. And I worked in many different fields. And for a long time, it was again like I'm doing all these different things and it didn't really fit together. But now, again, I had this sense that, oh, now it's coming together. And early 2020, I decided to leave my job as a railway engineering manager
Mm.
to launch my new business as a philosophy consultant. And the timing was strange because I was like, I'm going to make a big change in my life. And that was March 2020. And the whole world goes, you're going to do what?
For everybody, right? Pause.
Exactly. Yeah. It was like, whoa. So the first 2 years was really a lot about business development. I made a vlog and also to define for myself, like one thing is to say, I'm going to do this, but then how do I actually talk about it? What is it that I actually do? And so for a couple of years, it was about finding more clarity in that. And then it came together. And now, since then, I've been moving more and more into this space where I'm at. And the year before last, 2023, I co-authored. I wrote a chapter in a book together with 10 other people. And
Mm.
last year, I actually wrote my first book, which is called The Way of Phi. It just came together, and it was a very intuitive process. And that's an amalgamation of all the things that I have learned over 50 years. It's the way of fire, bridging polarization through dynamic balance.
Mm.
And so balance is really, if I were to select one word for these first 50 years, it would be balance. I've been studying balance in many different ways, physically, emotionally, mentally, socially, existentially, spiritually.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. And I'm
I
really
love that.
excited.
Yeah, wow, you just said a lot of things. There's a lot to unpack there. First of all, I love the book. I love the book title. I love what it means
Thank you.
because it aligns with what I talk about from a human alchemy perspective. So
Mm,
I went on a journey and started studying ancient alchemy and looking at
mm,
that from the art and science of changing metals, right? Using the elements, right? So that was the first
mm,
connection. But then I started looking at that more anciently and more spiritually. And that's really about heart, mind, body, soul, and then God, higher power, creator, however you want to look at that. But then those still seem very ethereal in nature. And so I started looking at how do we look at things emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, ethereally, and like what you're talking about in finding balance. There's this human experience is really about for us to find balance in these areas so that we can start to experience this life in a way that's more fulfilling and I'll say harmonious for us in many respects, right? And there are a lot of people I would say that are struggling, right? Experiencing chaos, experiencing the imbalance, not experiencing the quote unquote abundance that they want, all the different things that people certainly have a reason to complain about in some respects, but yet not willing to do the work to find balance in these areas. I find it fascinating that you found it in your 20s, right? But you had a different experience. And I want to dig deeper into that because your experience sounds similar to mine. I went into the military, right? And when I went into the
mm,
military, I got to travel the world. And
mm,
when I came back after the first year of traveling, I looked at all my peers who were the same. I was 19. When I came
mhm.
back at 19, I'm looking at my peers thinking like, you guys have no idea what's happening in the rest of the world. Like you have,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
so tell me about your experience because you said you went to India and that seems like that's where the thing started for you. So tell me more about that.
Thank you. Yeah, and really cool to hear about the connection with alchemy. And it's an interesting connection there as well. And actually, before I went, I was in the army in Sweden, but I was just spending 2 winters in the north of Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
So experienced winter twice. We had -40 at the coldest, which is, by the way, where Celsius and Fahrenheit meet. So -40
Yeah.
is -40 wherever you go.
Minus 40 is
Uh,
minus 40. Okay. That's
So, but then
right.
after that, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I worked for a while at the magazine. I worked as a music teacher, and I'm going to go move to London and start my career as a musician. So I packed up my things and I went to London. I didn't have a plan. I didn't want to prepare. I just went there. Well, I did prepare, but I didn't want to plan it out. So I went there and I just found a hostel. I stayed there for a while with the intention of living in London. But then I
Mm.
met some travelers, like travelers, this new kind of people. Ah, we're travelers. Maybe you should join us. Yeah, maybe
Wow.
I should do that.
That's wild. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really cool. There was this bunch of five guys, two Canadians and one from New Zealand, and or maybe three Canadians and one
Mm,
British guy. And so we ended up going to Turkey. We were there for 2 months.
mm,
And then I met a woman and we traveled through Eastern Europe and
mm,
she was from Australia and said, yeah, maybe I'll go to Australia. And then on the way, I ended up going to India. And so it's like meandering around these, meeting one person who invites to the next step and someone else, maybe we should go here. And
mm,
so step by step, the journey was presenting itself to me rather
mm.
than the other way around.
Right.
And I ended up spending 4 months in India, and it was a very special experience. And it's, I mean, it's so classic. Go to India and spiritual or something, but it
Hmm.
came together beautifully. And this was back in the mid 90s.
Mm,
And I back then, no one of my friends, the people I knew, no one had gone to India. And it was unheard of in Sweden. What?
mm,
What? You're doing what? But I felt like that's where I'm going. So I just followed my, and that's been the journey for me a lot
mm,
too. I follow my curiosity, I do that. And until quite recently, it's been also a quite lonely journey because even though I've met other travelers on the way, it's been more like parallel tracks, meeting for a while, spending some time together, and then going off in different ways. So it's been a journey of discovery, I would say, in many ways. Mm.
mm, mm.
And how long were you in the army for, Paul?
I was in the Navy for four
Oh,
years.
Navy.
I was in
Four
the Navy
years.
for 4 years.
Wow.
Yep. And then I got injured during Desert Shield, Desert Storm time frame.
Uh-huh.
And then I discharged from the Navy back in 92, the early 90s.
Wow.
But it sounds like an interesting, like, it sounds like what you did was say yes. I love the curiosity. You had the curiosity there and you just said, why not?
Yeah, definitely.
It reminds me of a story. There was a moment where I had one of those moments and I didn't take advantage of it. It's funny. I'm going to talk about it, and I don't really talk about it very often. But I remember that when I was at sea the first year that I went say on a vessel, we stopped in Brazil, and the ship that I was on, it happened to be during Carnival season. And so we were in port maybe 2 weeks. I had to work during the day, but I got to go ashore during the evening time with the
Yay.
officers and have a good time. I'm 20 years, I'm 19, 19, 20, 19 or 20 at the time. And I remember distinctly calling my father from the ship. At that time, we had satellite phones on the ships, and so it cost $10 a minute to have a conversation. I called my family, and I'm in Brazil. So I don't even know what time it was during the day in the States, but I called my father, and my father answered the phone. He said, "Hey, what's going on?" He said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in Brazil." He goes, "How is it there?" And I said, "It's beautiful." He said, "Yeah." And I said, "No, it's all beautiful." He's like, "What does that mean?" I was like, "Everything's beautiful. The country's beautiful. The people are beautiful. Everybody's beautiful. I think I'm going to stay." He says, "What?" And I said, "I think I'm
Ah.
going to stay." He says, "So I'm going to tell you this one time. If you don't get back on that ship and come back home, your mother's going to kill you." And so
Ooh.
I never stayed. It was one of those things. I wish I had done it, but at the same token, had I done that, you and I probably would not be talking today, right?
Mm,
Because I think that every experience that we've been given, we're given all these opportunities. Some things we say yes to, some things we say no to. But everything that we've decided in the past leads to right now, right? Everything we've
mm,
ever experienced. But so there's a reason why we're having this conversation, and there's a reason why we're curious about where this could lead. And I'm really just excited. But thank you for sharing that, because I think there are a lot of people that love to say yes.
mm,
I mean, you had a plan, not a plan, but you at least planned it out, at least part of it, right? And then you just said, "Hey, let's go with it."
mm.
And what was it about your experience growing up that I don't know if empowered is the right word, but how did you come to that place? I guess is the question.
Hmm. So I think my answer to that, and also as a response to what you just shared about your experience in Brazil, I feel that when it comes down to it, we have one choice.
Mm,
And maybe we don't even have one choice because at the end of the day, my experience is that in every life situation, I do the thing that I think is the best, given my circumstances, my level of energy, my current understanding, where I'm at, what I heard in the last few days, maybe, or what has influenced me or inspired me. So, like in every situation, I really try to do this is the best choice right now, given what I know. And I think that's true for all of us. So perhaps this is a philosophical question, like where is there freedom of will? Is there actually such a thing as freedom of will? Or is that just an illusion that keeps us thinking about this idea that we have all these choices, but actually we're just choosing what we think is right all the time? And in that situation in Brazil, for whatever reason, you came to the conclusion that the best choice is not to stay in Brazil, but to go back to the States and to go back on the boat. But for me, I think my upbringing with my father, with my father is a very curious person as well. And we had a lot of conversations when I was a child, and that certainly helped. But then there was also quite a lot of turmoil, dysfunction in the family. So, which kind of, and when I was young, when I was a child, we lived in Kenya for a couple of years, and I spent a lot of time in Hungary, where my father is from. So I already had this curiosity about the world. So on the one hand, like the open-mindedness of just asking questions, being curious. On the other hand, also a longing to go away, go somewhere else, see something different. Like I didn't feel particularly attached. I never felt very Swedish, to be honest. Even my mother is Swedish, my father is Hungarian. As I said, I lived in different countries, and it's more okay. So I happen to be born here. But then my experience has been more that meeting those people in London, the travelers, I felt more in common with them than with some people that I grew up with, because it's more like a resonance of being human.
Yes.
What you're talking about, human 2.0, I like this expression. Like being human is more than just being alive. Like there is something else which can awaken. And so
Yeah.
that sense of togetherness, I feel more like I'm of that tribe rather than of a certain nationality or not. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I love that. It's funny because you talked about this awakening, and I think that's the experiences give the awakening, right? I look at the search for knowledge, the conversations, the learning, the teachings, the teaching, all that to be like an opportunity for us to discover some things, right? To discover information that exists, or maybe it doesn't exist, but I'm gonna argue that all the information that's ever been created already exists. It's just a matter of us having access to it and being able to then take it in. But the awakening really is about the experiential piece, the embodying piece, the being able to say, to follow that desire to be curious and see it through. It's funny when I started thinking about the Brazil thing. And I think what held me back was probably, I'm going to say fear, but I'm trying to figure out where did the fear come from? Right? There was fear. I don't know if it was fear that I wouldn't enjoy the experience. I think it was fear of my mom's wrath. No, I think it was more about the fear of disappointing other people, because my upbringing was that my parents went to college. They met at college, and their parents were really the first generation in our families that went to higher education, went to a university. And so it's almost like there was like this legacy that I had to fulfill. So it was like if I had left the military, or which meant that I left the academy that I was attending and pursued this carefree life in Brazil, I'd be letting everybody down. So I think part of that was more so trying to live up to other people's expectations. And what I like about your experience is just a little bit you shared. It sounds like your parents, or at least your father, was curious, and that was something that struck you, and that allowed you to follow that curiosity without feeling too encumbered by, well, you need to be here, you need to do these things, you need to adhere to these rigid guidelines around how you're supposed to live your life. And at least you had the opportunity to have that experience without feeling like you couldn't. I don't know if I'm saying it, but I find it fascinating that everybody has their own experience. And I think many times in the world, we superimpose our experience on other people just as humans. And we think everybody
Mm,
has the same experience, but we don't. And I find it curious because I like that. I like that we have different experiences. And I like that. And then the reason why I like it, because like my philosophy is we're here to experience the full range of human emotions and all the experiences that we have. And some of our experiences may or may not be considered good experience or the great experience, or maybe they're bad or how we want to categorize them. But if we take the judgments off of them and just take the experience of what it is, we're learning something from that experience, either about ourselves and about what we might
mm,
want, or maybe it's about what we don't want, right? And we learn
mm,
that too. But the entire experience is to teach us some lesson, to give us some
mm,
lesson about life, right? And what it means to
mm,
be in these physical vessels, if you will, depending on how you want to talk about it. But I find it fascinating.
yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And these past few months have been very much on that note, in the
Mm,
sense that even the challenging experiences have something very important to bring to the surface. It sounds almost self-evident to say it, but it's becoming more clear on a visceral level that if
mm,
I resist the experience I'm having, for example, if there is pain in my body and I resist it and tense up, then I'm going to feel bad, and B, I'm not going to be able to release whatever tension is there.
mm-hmm,
Whereas the more I can just relax into it, even if it's painful, and just breathe with it, then something is like, oh, something is here. And to have this curious mindset about, wow, something is really going on. Like today, for example, I've had a really challenging day today. So
mm,
like I've had experienced the breathing has been quite challenging. It's like, and just allowing myself, like, okay, so today is a day when it's challenging to breathe. So I went outside, I went for a walk, and did different things, not pushing myself through it, but just allowing myself to walk through it. And when I needed
mm-hmm,
to take a rest, I took a rest, but still coming back to the work, like not just bailing out also, but yeah, okay, one step and then the next, and one breath and then the next. And then
mm-hmm,
somehow things present themselves. And then the transformation happens on its own accord. And I think
mm-hmm.
that is, for me, patience has been a something that I've had to learn. And
Mm,
so my learning is that if I'm not patient enough, then I have to be even more patient, because it's not going to change if I'm impatient about it. So the
yeah.
more patient I can be, then things can actually flow at the optimal speed. So,
Mm,
and when I was in Turkey as part of this journey around the world that I mentioned, I just bumped into this guy. I brought my guitar and I thought, yeah, I'm gonna play a guitar and sing at bars and stuff, and girls are gonna come, which we did, and it was great.
which
But
we
then,
did.
but then I met this guy who was a Turkish man called Fatih, and he had a whitewater rafting company. I was like, you know what? You want to come and be a whitewater rafting instructor? I was like, maybe I could do that, but I'm traveling with five other guys. I'm just going to check. Really? Bring them as well. You can all come. It's like, all right. So I went back to them, and I was like the novice in the group. Guys, I met this guy. He wants us to be whitewater rafting instructors. What do you think? He's like, yeah, let's do that. So we went into this, just doing that for a while, and learning about the river and like how the river flows. And so the river, like this as a metaphor,
Mm,
um,
mm,
both literally and as a metaphor, like the flow of the river, like how can we just relax into the flow, not like this expression, don't push the river, don't go
hmm.
against the river, but just let the river carry us. I think
Yeah.
there is so much in that.
There's a lot in that metaphor. That's almost a journey of life, right? The more we
Mm,
resist the experiences, the more difficult it seems to be. But if we're able to flow with life, not against it, but certainly flow with it and make some different adjustments along the way, maybe the experience is going to be a little different, hopefully better.
mm.
It's interesting.
and
I
more
like I like
real, more authentic. Like,
more authentic. Yeah, I think I like the idea. The lesson is patience, right? I think there's a lot of that. A lot of that's needed in the curiosity for sure. Patience is another thing. I find a lot of people now coming asking questions around purpose and meaning and in calling. I've had lots of conversations about that over the last couple of weeks, which has been surprising, but also refreshing at the same time. It actually
mm,
forced me to, not forced me, but it certainly informed me in a way to, hey, put together a jumpstart for connecting the purpose. Because I feel like purpose is out there for everyone. But when I look at it, when I take a step back and look at it, I feel like generally speaking, purpose for everyone is about growing themselves and giving to others. But the way
mm,
you grow and the way you give is unique to you, right? And those are the things that you're called to do. Those are the things that you're passionate about. Those are the things that speak to you, that you resonate with, and that you move forward and say yes to, right? The things that we're called to do, and ultimately those things end up helping us grow and or giving to others in some form or fashion. If I ask you, what do you feel called to do these days? What do you feel called to do?
thanks for asking that question.
Mm,
I love it, and I'd like to ask you the same.
mm,
I would say what I feel called to do now is to be a philosopher. Writing this book, The Way of Phi, has been a very important milestone for me, sharing what I've learned,
mm,
and then supporting people who want to embark on the inner journey, who want to go deeper, who want to get to know themselves, who are prepared to do the work. And I'm talking about philosophy in a holistic sense, like the classical philosophers, which includes the body, emotions, the mind, relations, the existential and the spiritual aspects of us as humans.
mm,
So, really supporting people who are successful in an external sense and who realize that, whoa, something is probably missing because I'm not happy, even though I have all those things I set out for myself that I wanted. And I
mm,
think a lot of the world is polarized. This is like the central theme of the book. But it's also not only polarized, but also out of balance, tilting towards what I call the linear. So
mm,
I talk about the linear and the circular. And the
yeah.
linear is all about setting goals. Like, I want to reach this. I want to make $1 million or $1 billion. I want to have this house and this wife and whatever, and setting up goals. And there is nothing wrong with that in itself. But it seems that this linear quality, which I relate to a masculine quality, which is go out and get what you want, has taken over so much of our value system to the
Mm,
detriment of the circular, which is much more about purpose,
mm,
being, love, relationships, the feminine qualities. And we all have both the masculine and the feminine qualities within us. Although
mhm,
as men, we are externally masculine and internally feminine, and with women, it's vice versa. And I think this delicate balance of balancing ourselves is so important at this time because with all these conflicts we're seeing in the world, whether it's war or crime or problems with migration related things or uh, so many different things. It's just open any newspaper and it's all about these problems. I think
mm,
it stems from people being unbalanced. So any real change in the world has to start within.
yeah.
And then if changes that we affect outside of ourselves will become real. So it's really to help people to be on the inner journey as a guide to
Mhm,
support. This is what I feel called to do.
yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I always feel like there's no coincidences, right? It's similar, same journey. I have gone through this experience. I'm 54 now. I've gone through this experience. I've observed a lot of things. I've discovered a lot of things about myself. I've also have embodied many different practices to try to incorporate in my life so that I could create some awareness, create the space, do some reflection, do a lot of the inner work. I got on the purpose path, if you will, back in 2016. And I happened to be working at a global institute for leadership development. That's what it's called, but it was a global immersive experience for executive leaders in Fortune 100 companies. And I got invited to be faculty in this experience, which was really great. And it was one of those top of pinnacle things that you check off. Say, oh, I achieved that. I did that thing. I got invited
Cool.
to this. So that's really
Way to
cool.
go.
So you feel like you're on top of the world, and then someone asks you the question. That's what happened to me. There was a gentleman there who happens to be on the board, and he was one of the speakers, and he was also a researcher in the area of purpose. And he asked me, he said, what are the two most important days of your life? And at the time, I really couldn't answer the question. And we had some conversation about it. And in his talk, he talks about the first one is easy. It's the day you're born, right? So that's born to the existence. But then the second one, many people will say, oh, it's my birth of my children. I met the love of my life, or I had this happen, or these things happen. And it really is about figuring out, why were you born? What are you here to experience? What are you here to do? And he got me thinking about what ancient civilizations used to do, ancient cultures used to do. If you go to some indigenous tribes, some of that tradition is still there. If you talk to the wise men or the elders of a tribe, they will share the same knowledge with you. And that knowledge has been passed down for eons in different cultures and different philosophical individuals in the past, and gurus and prophets and sages and shaman. They all talk about the same thing.
Yep.
And so I got on that path, and it's really been a journey of discovery and some awakening. And now to me, it's the living in purpose, on purpose, so with intention. And that's where the evolution happens, because I started embodying all those things I was sharing with the people that I worked with, so my clients at the time. But now I feel even more clear about it. So I feel like I'm called to do 5 things, right? So the first thing is to awaken spirit in other people, right? And that is just to get people tuned in to this frequency and be on a path for self-learning, self-development, personal enlightenment, whatever that looks like. But just be on the journey to be curious and want more out of this experience. Right? And then there's building relationships with other people. I think that one of the things we lost, particularly with COVID, but we were moving in the direction of, with all the technology and all the distractions in our environments, we've lost the art of connection and building real, authentic, sacred relationships with this other humans. And on one hand, we're the most connected than we've ever been in time. I'm talking to a gentleman in Sweden.
Yep.
That I didn't know existed until maybe a month ago. And that wouldn't just happen 1,000 years ago. That wouldn't have happened. So yeah, that's awesome. We're connected, but do we know how to connect? And I think so. Building relationships with people that are meaningful, authentic, is another thing I'm called to do. COVID exposed that to everybody. Of course, that's the biggest challenge we have now, is no one knows how to connect. Generally speaking, I'm not saying everybody's in that boat, but certainly it feels we don't know how to have relationships anymore. The other thing is making connections, and that's about taking knowledge and information and seeing how it applies and relates, and making those disparate connections between these items. Like for me, for example, it's spiritual alchemy, it's ancient alchemy, the science of alchemy, and then it's like understanding the human experience, and bringing in some spiritual alchemy, and merging all of those into something else, right? I'm calling it human alchemy, which is really about how do we take the ethereal and make it practical. We can talk about enlightenment and self-actualization all we want to. These are great themes to talk about. But if you're not meeting basic needs, you can't self-actualize. If you don't know yourself, you can't be enlightened. So it's almost there's a starting point for everything. And so how do you make the starting point attainable? Maybe change the language around that and repackage it just a little bit so that people can understand it. So making connections is really important to me. Bringing joy is another one. I like to have experiences, and if I have an experience that I can share with other people, I'm more inclined to do that than to receive a gift or receive something for me personally that someone feels I need. I'd rather give experiences to other people and just watch the joy on their faces. It's like
Mm-hmm.
playing with little kids. Over the holiday, we took kids to the beach and the water is freezing.
Mm.
But they're playing around and frolicking in the water, and just to hear them laughing, giggle, I don't know what it does, but it's just it changes the frequency around your heart. You just feel like you just want to explode because you're watching it and you're sitting here thinking, that is me.
Mm.
That is me. I'm just living through them in that experience. But to watch kids, even adults, I like when people smile. I like when people are laughing. I like when people are having a great time and they're feeling like that they don't want the experience to end. And then that came down to applying that to my world. It's like I said, okay, I'm talking about human alchemy and I'm talking about emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, and conscious well-being, and really talking about how we embody practices that may have existed anciently that we sometimes misappropriate and try to monetize, and we're going to make it the most, it's going to be the fad today, and everybody's running around doing hot yoga, but nobody understands what yoga is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or qigong or any martial arts for that matter, or understanding breath work is not just this new thing that someone just came up with. It's looking at things like that and saying there's medicine in sound, there's medicine in
Mm.
food, right? There's medicine in being close to the earth and touching the ground and being in the water and being in the sun. It's
Mm.
like these
Mm.
are remedies and healing modalities that have been used for eons that we try to make the newest fad or the newest popular thing to do and put some
Mm.
wrappers around and say, hey, I'm going to take you to a retreat and you're going to be in the sun for 7 weeks and I'll charge you $10,000. And it's like,
Mm.
how about let's not do that?
Mm.
And maybe just
Yeah.
educate people.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think this is such a great time to be alive because I
Mm,
was thinking about that just the other day as I was leaving my mother's place. And for some reason it occurred to me that I remembered I went to a concert perhaps 15 years ago, or maybe even more, 20 years ago. And there was this guy, this kind of spiritual Swedish musician who was singing and his songs about love and light and stuff. And then between a few of the songs, the person I was there with, I looked at her and I said, "Oh, so what do you think?" "No, I don't like it. Too many open messages." And I said, okay. And I thought about that. And then now that I reflected, I was like, okay, so maybe the time wasn't really right then for open
mm,
messages, but now I feel that it is. I
mm,
think we have somehow passed through a transition point. In the
mm,
past, you talked about alchemy, like the alchemists, they were so secretive. No, nobody
mm.
could know what they were doing because it was like if they found out, they would probably kill them.
Yeah.
And so they had to keep everything esoteric. Everything was like confined, explained through metaphors, explained like the Bible is also full of metaphors.
Mm,
Everything is not said clearly. And some things cannot really be explained without using metaphors, like we were talking about the river earlier. So
mm,
that makes sense. But on the other hand, I feel like we're now in a place where it is okay to talk about things that matter in a real way, like talking about our emotions for real and talking
mm,
about what is actually important. And also to do that in a business setting. Like I've experienced in my business life, I experienced like in earlier when I was younger and working, people are like, you have to separate between the professional and the personal. And
mm,
I don't think that's true anymore, if it ever were. And I certainly don't do it myself. There are levels of what I would share with one person another. Of course, there is. Just
of
as I
course.
choose clothes depending on the situation. You know, I don't wear a suit for the beach, but still be yourself in every situation. I think that is not just possible, but essential on a personal level and as a society. And I think that's where we're at right now. That's the invitation that I feel like be yourself. Learn who you
Yeah.
are, get to know yourself and be yourself.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. It's interesting. So we're talking about it in a business sense. You said something and it's like, yeah, I remember having two profiles. I had professional and personal. And it was funny when I was told to merge them and make it one profile. I had a lot of cognitive dissonance about it, because I think we just fed this message. You have to keep these things separate. But on the other hand, just like you said, this is the invitation to be yourself. I think that COVID taught us a couple lessons.
Mm-hmm.
COVID taught us, we're exposed to the whole world. We saw economic disparities globally. We saw conflict globally. We saw challenges in the world that we can't unsee. We talk about migration, but there's also the food deserts that have been created, and there's a reason why people are migrating. And
Sure.
when you start to realize what's really happening and watching the totality of all these things that are impacting humans, it's like you can't unsee it. But then the other thing is we realize in ourselves that we're playing all these roles and we have all of these masks. I can wear many hats, and I think wearing hats is fine, right? But the mask
Yeah.
was never healthy. And in some cultures we were required to wear the mask because you couldn't be your authentic self, because if you were, then you got accused of being a certain way based on perception or maybe stereotype or who knows what it is. But the mask has come off for a lot of people. But I think now the question is, I think many people are asking, okay, I can take the mask off, but how do I be myself?
Yeah.
And I think that's like the question I hear a lot of people asking is, who am I? And it's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, but that's a great question. Who are you?
It is a great question. It's the biggest philosophical question we can ask. That's like such an opening. If once someone starts asking that question, that's like a ticket. Just embark on this beautiful journey of wherever it will take us. And
Where I'm going to take you.
yeah, this
And
is
so
lovely. Yeah.
I love it because the timing is right for folks to have some kind of awakening, or at least get reconnected to self, have the opportunity to explore themselves if they'd like to. I think more people will opt in than will opt out.
Mm.
I think that as the world changes, it's going to necessitate that. The biggest conversation we are having here in the US is about AI and technology, right? And just all the
Yeah.
technological advances. I'm sure it's happening globally, but I'll put it in that context. So I don't want to suppose. But the question is, could we lose humanity by embracing the technology? And I think you're going to get a mixed bag of answers. Like for me, I feel like this is how Human 2.0 was born. I look at it like, great, the technology is awesome. I was a technologist for 15
Mm.
years, right? I was an early adopter too. I'm still an early adopter. Right? You got new technology, I got it. I got the first one, maybe the second one, right? But when you start to realize that there are some advances that I think are really great for people that need them, but when you get into the whole conversation about who gets access to that, and then you start putting guidelines and qualifications, then it becomes a capitalistic type of monetization of technology. And then what happens next? People are talking about, oh, we got fighter jets now, they can fly with AI and fly better than regular fighter pilots. Okay, great. So you don't need fighter pilots anymore. Probably not. That's interesting. But what happens? Who makes a decision for the jets? And we've seen all the movies in the past, right?
We have seen the movies. Yeah, these are interesting times. I feel like we could keep talking for hours, Paul. This has been really
Yeah,
wonderful and interesting. And I have really enjoyed our conversation, I must say.
yeah.
So I'm happy
I'm
about
definitely gonna.
this.
I want to invite you back for sure. I know that actually. Drop the name of your book again. Let's get that out there.
Mm,
Where can folks get it? We'll do that, and then I'll go ahead and wrap this up, and we'll have a quick conversation afterwards. The Way of
cool.
Five.
The Way of Phi.
Mhm.
And it's available on Amazon worldwide. Maybe we can
Awesome.
put a link in the description for the
Yep.
podcast.
Do that and
So
all your social connections. But we'll do
lovely.
that. But it's really been great having you on this show.
Thank
Certainly
you.
would love to have you on again so we can continue the conversations. Like you're right.
Yeah,
We
I'd
can keep
love that,
talking.
Paul. I'd love that. Absolutely. It's the first time we talk, so it's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and hit pause here, but then hang on for 1 second. What if personal growth wasn't meant to be a solo journey? What if the transformation you've been seeking isn't found in another self-help book, but can be found in a living, breathing ecosystem of growth? Welcome to the Becoming Human 2.0 Incubator, where conscious evolution meets authentic connection. Life isn't something that is just happening to you. It's calling you to step into something greater, to break through your limitations, to unlock your highest potential. But here's the truth. Transformation isn't meant to happen alone. Deep down, we all long for something more than self-improvement. We crave real human connection, a space where we are seen, understood, and supported in our evolution. That's why we created the Becoming Human 2.0 Incubator, a high-frequency space where seekers, world changers, and conscious leaders come together to evolve. Integrating our Becoming Human 2.0 blueprint, we merge science, ancient wisdom, and personal mastery to create deep, lasting transformation. Your journey? The 3 phases of evolution. Discover who are you and why are you here? Gain clarity, expand your awareness, and reconnect with your highest self. Awaken. Step into mastery. Optimize your heart, mind, body, and spiritual energy. Align with your purpose. Evolve. Embody your highest and true self. Sustain transformation. Live in flow and create meaningful impact. This isn't just another course, and it's not just another community. It's something much deeper. A space with purpose, a tribe, a living, breathing ecosystem of transformation, guided by the 5 pillars of human alchemy and the 7 domains of personal mastery. Here's what makes the incubator unique. A personalized, science-backed roadmap or path for true transformation without the hype. A real, connected tribe of like-minded humans. Not just another online group or activity-based community. Live coaching, expert mentorship, and energy-based practices. A fusion of modern science, ancient wisdom, and conscious alignment. And that is only the beginning. Now, you might be wondering if this is for you. So, if you're feeling stuck, disconnected, or craving a real path to mastery, if you know that you're meant for something greater, if you're feeling the call to help guide others in their personal journey, or if you're simply ready to evolve beyond limitations, then the incubator is definitely for you. Special invitation founding members offer. The first 20 individuals to join will gain access at a special grandfather founding members rate. This is a one-time opportunity before these spaces are filled. Are you ready to step into your highest potential? Join the Becoming Human 2.0 Incubator today. Comment Evolve or click the link below to get started. The next version of you is waiting.